Hello, hi everyone, welcome. We're going to give people just a couple minutes to join us, so hang tight. While we're waiting, if you want to introduce yourself in the chat box, you're welcome to. I see some familiar faces and some new ones, so welcome to everyone. Hi, Lisa.
Hi, Mariah. Hi, everyone.
So yeah, we'll give people just another couple of minutes here and then we'll get started. I hope everyone's enjoying this gorgeous day. I have a view outside, so I'm trying not to be too distracted. All right, Kelby, are we good in the waiting room? Do you think we should go ahead and get started?
Yeah, I think we're ready to go.
All right, so we might have some other folks trickling in, but for now we'll go ahead and get started. And I just want to say hello and welcome to another Alliance Center webinar. We're so excited that everyone is here joining us today. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Mariah and I'm our Director of Tenant Services here at the Alliance Center. So I get the honor of working with and supporting our tenant community. Just a couple housekeeping items as we get started. I think everyone knows this by now, but make sure that everyone stays on mute. If you forget or something happens, no worries. I have the power to mute you, so no problem there. If you are not familiar with Zoom, up in the upper right-hand corner of your screen, you can change it to speaker view, and that's probably going to be the best viewing experience. And I know that screen fatigue is real, so we prefer it if you keep your video on so that we can see your lovely faces, but obviously feel free to turn it off if you need to. And lastly, this session will be recorded, so we will be able to send it out to everyone here and to anyone else who isn't able to make it today. So without further ado, I will introduce our speakers today. Our guests of honor are from our very own team, so they may be familiar to some of you. Kelby Johnson and Danny Orth have been in the events world for a long time now, and they have a wealth of experience to bring to the conversation and to share with all of you, especially in the context of this sort of worldwide transition to virtual events that we've been experiencing. They've received various credentials since the start of COVID on virtual event planning, and they've had firsthand experience planning several virtual events over the last few months. So I'm excited to hear from them. If you have any questions at all, there will be a few Q&A sections sprinkled throughout the presentation. So feel free to chat your questions directly to me in the chat box, or you can save them for the end. And without further ado, I will hand it over to Danny and Kelby.
Well, thank you, Mariah. And first of all, thank you all for joining today. We're really excited to share with you our knowledge that we've learned over these past couple of months, learning how to kind of navigate this virtual world. And so for those who haven't met me before, my name is Kelby Johnson, and I work as the events coordinator here at the Alliance Center.
And my name is Danny Orth. I'm the events director here at the Alliance Center. Virtual and hybrid events have been part of the event landscape for a long time, but they're hitting their moment with COVID restricting in-person gatherings. At this point, we're going to assume most people have some beginner level of experience with events and virtual event planning, but we want to confirm with a quick poll. So you should see the poll pop up. If you could take just a second to share with us your level of planning. Have you had no experience? Maybe you've planned a couple. Maybe you're super experienced and you could teach us a thing or two. right. I'm going to end polling and share with you.
Awesome. Well, thank you guys for giving us a good baseline of everybody's experience. It kind of looks like we have a range of different levels of experience with hosting and planning virtual events. But just regardless of if you're putting together a virtual or an in-person event, you'll really need to consider several key factors for your event to be successful. And we are in no way providing you a fully comprehensive list of things to consider, and we really are continuously learning along with you all. But to start things off, the first thing you need to do is define the goal of your event. So why are you hosting the event? Is it for fundraising, educating, inspiring, spreading awareness, whatever it is? What are you hoping people will take away from the event? Who is your audience, and what are you hoping to attract and who are you hoping to attract to join? How will you communicate with your attendees to get them to be engaged? Engagement really is a huge part of these virtual events. When will your event be? The time of day of week, all matters. And finally, what will the cost of your event be and what should you budget for? So planning for the cost of the event and registration platforms, cost to bring on speakers, and then any of the costs to set up tech, create graphic designs, craft communication, marketing materials, things like that you should be considering for your event budget. And all these things are pretty big to determine ahead of your event. Our team has gone through the introductory planning period quite a few times, and through a lot of practice and troubleshooting, we've picked up a few helpful tips and tricks. So firstly, you want to make sure you're planning your event during a time that your target audience will be able to attend your event, and make sure it's not a limiting time frame. A later event can be great, but also keep in mind that people might have been signed off from work, might be needing to take care of children, or not want to get back online after a long remote day. And with everyone a bit burned out from staring at the screen, we do suggest you keep your event short or break it up into multiple days to be able to keep your attendees' attention. Event psychology is coming out that people's attention spans are limited to only 14 minutes of heavy content. So keeping your event to less than an hour really is vital. And if you are looking at doing a longer event, you can break it up a little through the inclusion of things like a cocktail class, a yoga break, or like even a cookie decorating session to help liven up the energy. Ensuring your event is planned in a way that people will be able to focus on and digest the presented material will really make or break your attendees' engagement and ultimately the success of your event. So if anything, we hope you will walk away from this webinar with that piece of advice. And another factor of being in this current remote world is that people can be pretty overwhelmed with digital communication. And I'm sure everybody has kind of experienced the overflowing inboxes. So it's really beneficial to find a time to do personal outreach, such as like an event gift basket, a phone call, a personalized card. Things like this really go a long way in a time where we are socially distanced. So making that connection and personalizing invitations and information really is a great move. And shifting over to engagement strategies, other ways to engage during the event. To engage your audience, we've discovered that some of the best ways are to allow for people to use multiple different methods to connect with others through things like network opportunities, breaking people up into smaller groups with someone leading the conversation, utilizing platform features like chatting and polling like we're doing, allowing for bio breaks, and there's a lot of other really great engagement options out there. And another thing to consider is if you'd like your event to be fully virtual and have everyone engage from their screens, or if you'd like to include a hybrid option and have a smaller group be in person with others to also be able to join via computer. And either of these options works great, and both have their benefits, but you do just need to make sure that you're engaging both audiences when you're doing something like a hybrid meeting and really encouraging that interaction between the two groups. And some ways that we found that are helpful to do this engagement and interaction is to have everyone pulled up on a screen in the live meeting room and communicate with them as though they are still in the room, and also just making sure that you're asking both groups questions throughout the event. And another factor with this is that if you are planning on charging for your event, you really shouldn't have to discount for your virtual participants. This is kind of becoming a norm in the industry because you're still providing really great content that has a huge amount of worth. So you should still be charging for these kinds of events. And there was kind of a similar situation in the past with the previous growing online music scene when people were unsure if we're paying for online music, but of course now we know that is like completely the norm. And so don't be afraid to charge and to get a little bit of income from still having virtual participants. And finally, to help with costs surrounding your event, it really can be beneficial to recruit and include sponsors in your event. So don't shy away from including them. So a lot of platforms have options for sponsor engagement through things like linked clickable banners, setting up lifelike sponsor booths where you can go and talk to a representative, highlighting sponsors through video inclusion, and a lot of other ways. So using the right platform really can give your sponsors a lot of visibility and the return on investment that is very beneficial.
So once you've laid the groundwork for your event, like Kelby has pointed out, you'll need to think about speakers who can disseminate the information. This process doesn't have to be difficult. You can really utilize your network to make speaker suggestions because your network will likely not only be able to have recommendations, but they'll likely be able to put you in connection with speakers you may not have otherwise been able to contact. Most professional speakers will require an honorarium where you pay them for their time and services. But if you're on a tight budget, don't be afraid to be honest and negotiate with the speakers to find a mutually beneficial way to honor their time without a financial commitment. Things such as promoting the speaker and their company on social media, in newsletters, etc., are all good ways to honor the speakers. Another big factor to consider is how you're going to engage with your audience. There is a large range of options for how to get your attendees involved in your virtual or hybrid event. You can make the event very hands-off with pre-recorded sessions with little interaction, or on the flip side, you can use a variety of engagement strategies to pull the audience into your content and event. Kelby mentioned a few times earlier some easy ways to keep attendees focused through breakout rooms, networking tables, polling and surveying, doing a live question and answer, utilizing the chat and walls to post on, and raffles. There's a lot of opportunities out there for you to use for your virtual or hybrid event. Also consider if you want to give your audience the option to engage with your content after the event ends. You can do this through sharing the recording like we're doing today, or have the platform still be accessible for people to come back and watch different sessions over and over again. You can also include an option like a specific event Slack channel so people can continue to connect with others and have conversations even after the event has ended. Other ways to continue the conversation using a certain platform where you can exchange virtual business cards or utilize a platform that has an inclusion of virtual networking spaces. We used a really cool platform this summer called Remo that has a virtual networking floor where people can move around the different virtual tables and talk to different people at each of those tables. Next, you can dive into the content of your event. You'll need to make decisions on if you will be including only live discussion or if you want to broadcast a PowerPoint like we're doing, if you want to use pre-recorded videos or images. There are certain platforms that handle integration where you download and then preload the videos and images and pulling up PowerPoints. So this is something that you should definitely consider just for an ease of flow of your event. You can also use platforms that give audience different pop-ups that display different content to the attendees so they can move it around their screen, or it can stay stationary. Like GoToWebinar is an example of that. Kelby, you're muted.
The joys of virtual events. There's always going to be little hiccups. So when you have this holistic idea of all that you're hoping to get out of your events and what your platform needs are, this is when you can really start to get into your platform decision process. So beginning to start demoing and collecting information about different platforms and figuring out which would be the best fit for you would be the next step. And a quick tip is that most platforms offer a demonstration of what they can do. But if you'd like to do your own test drive, which we really feel can give you a better idea of how the platform performs and what it will really do during your actual event, you can try reaching out to their team and see if they could give you a trial period or walk you through a personalized demo where you can ask questions specific to your event needs. And we've done that for previous platforms that we used, and it's been really helpful just to kind of get a better feel of the platform and see if it actually will run smoothly and meet all the needs that you have for your specific event. And this process is a bit of work. So if you do want to take the hassle out of the whole platform selection process, our events team has become super well versed and educated on a variety of platforms. There's so many out there. And so we would be happy to share with you our knowledge through our virtual consulting services and just be able to share our opinions and ideas with the different platforms. And in terms of cost, platforms have a definite range of different costs. So most offer both monthly or annual plans, depending on how many events you're wanting to host on that specific platform. So you have a shorter or longer period time. And then just make sure that you do inquire about the discounted nonprofit rates, as a lot of platforms do offer these, but it's not super publicized. So just make sure you ask about that. And if you can avoid it, really try not to skimp on a cheap platform. Going with the cheapest option can sometimes have a pretty big negative impact on your event, such as having spotty service, glitchy communication, things like that you want to be working smoothly. So, and this is especially a factor if you're planning a more difficult, complicated event. So setting yourself up with a high functioning platform really is an important thing to do.
We don't have time to talk through all the different considerations for platform features during this webinar, but here is just a little taste of things that might factor into your decision when selecting a platform. And we have a list of some of the platform options that are available for you to pick from. These two slides are specifically why we offer virtual event consulting services, because we take all of these things into consideration on your behalf and narrow down what platform options would be the best fit for your specific event. Everything we've discussed up to this point has all been dealing with pre-event work. We're going to pause on the slide and see if there's any questions from attendees on the pre-event work side. After this mini question session, we'll jump into items leading up to the day of your event. Mariah, is there any questions that we can help answer?
Yes, so somebody chatted me and asked about why you might choose to do a hybrid event instead of a virtual event in this day and age.
Yeah, so if you're hoping to shift back into the live events, which hopefully will be soon, we've had a couple of smaller events, but not to the full scale as it was before. But if you're hoping to shift back, because live events, of course, has so many benefits to it, but you still have attendees that are still a little bit hesitant to meet in person, hybrid events are kind of a great option to be able to have the best of both worlds, where people are comfortable to come in, but you're also able to engage with people via computer. And you also are able to have the elements of the live events and also be able to pull people from super far distances. I know I've seen people connecting to the webinars that I've been on from all over the world, which is a really special thing. So being able to have a hybrid event and still have that connection and that distance I think it's going to be a beneficial thing moving forward.
Cool, thank you. So I have a question from myself. What other event psychology items are out there? That sounds really interesting.
Ooh, yes. Event psychology is super cool, and it's really getting its time on stage right now with virtual events. So a couple of things that you can do for your event that is super easy to implement is not offering too many options when doing a poll or survey. Studies show that people really can't process more than 4 points of information at a time. Hence our 4-question poll at the beginning of today. You can use this concept in your registration, in your email communications ahead of time. But people really start to space out if you're providing too much information all at once. So break it up with several emails and several reminders just to ensure that people are actually reading what you're putting out there. There's another concept called social proof, which is a great way to increase registrations. So for example, you can post who has already registered for your event. But if people aren't comfortable with their name being out there, you can simply state that X number of people have already registered for your upcoming event. So you should too, because it's a really cool event. Check out all these people who have already registered. In contrast, you can use a concept called scarcity, where you only offer X number of tickets available. So you have to register right now. Tickets may not always be available. So those are two concepts you can use for registration. Kelby mentioned the keeping your heavy content under 14 minutes. That is such an important concept. And again, if you only walk away with one thing today, that would be the biggest one, is keep your events short, concise, and to the point. There's so many cool event psychology findings happening right now, and I really wish I had the time to go through all of them. But maybe we can set up another webinar to address these items specifically, since we do have to be conscious about our time today.
Yeah, definitely. That would be great. Let us know if that's something you'd be interested in attending, would be about sort of the psychology of events. I know that sounds great to me. I think we have time for one more question. So question about, how long before an event should you typically start the planning process?
As much time as possible. Regardless if you're planning an in-person event or a virtual or hybrid event, adequate planning will help ensure that you've thought through all the things that need to be addressed before the actual event, like registration, advertising, back-end support. There's obviously going to be times when last-minute events come up, and those are the exception to the rule. So just really try to plan ahead as much as possible. All right, so we'll jump back in here. So you've done your pre-event work, including picking your platform. The next thing you need to focus on is getting things set up on that platform. The amount of personalization that you can do with each platform really depends on which one you ultimately select. The next priority for you should be implementing the speaker test runs. These are key to the success of your event. Testing out technology, the flow of the event ahead of time, can really make or break the success of your event. If you can work out all the kinks beforehand and not have those like awkward moments where, a speaker can't turn on their video, or, there's a quick scramble to like message someone behind the scenes when it's their turn to present. If you can kind of address all of these things, it makes the event a whole lot easier and it seems more seamless to the attendees watching. You can go through these tech checks as a group, but what we've found is that it's easier to schedule and answer questions if you go through the speakers one by one. You can make sure that they are comfortable with the selected platform, they know how to mute and unmute, they know how to turn their video on and off, they know how to check their video audio connection, and you can really address their specific role during the event. Also, make sure that the device they are planning to use for the event is the device that they use during the test runs. It is also helpful to encourage speakers to hardline into a stable internet connection if this is an option for people. If you need help finding a space for this, we would be happy to provide a private room in our event space for people to hardline in and have a quiet place to base out of.
And then finally, your event is here and everything's set up and ready to go, and it's go time. So a huge thing to consider and ensure your event will run smoothly is having your communications streams set up beforehand. So ensuring that your attendees have an option to communicate with you if there are any issues connecting to the event, or turning on video and audio if you're wanting that to be an option for your attendees. And then making sure that you provide either your direct contact information or give people a communication channel specific to the event, such as a Facebook group or a Slack channel for attendees to get a hold of you through. And it also is a huge thing to make sure there's a streamlined way to communicate with specifically your tech support and speakers so that the chat isn't going to the entire group and that you have the ability to troubleshoot different issues that might arise with the person who's having the issues. And speaking of tech support, make sure you do have enough support and coverage for the back end of your event. If you're having someone run the slides, they might not be able to also monitor the chat box. That's why we have Mariah, which is great. And so making sure you consider the capacity of everyone involved. And if you need to get more support to cover all bases, making sure you have that already covered. And each platform is truly so unique. So really trying to educate yourself as much as possible on the features and what might go wrong and how to troubleshoot if it does. Being prepared really is the best way to feel confident going into your event. So a lot of information is publicized on the internet. So just being able to read and learn as much as possible about from blog posts, reviews, help posts, etc., to learn about other people's experiences and how you might learn from that, what they've gone through. And then hopefully you're ready to go, you're feeling confident, all the speakers are on the same page and you know what to do if things go south, and the whole event runs smoothly and it's a massive success.
Shifting your in-person event to a virtual or hybrid event will be crucial as we continue to navigate a COVID world. So we hope these tips and tricks help you do that. As we started this webinar, there's no way we could cover every possible thing to consider for hosting your virtual or hybrid event. Unless, of course, you wanted to stay on with us for the next 5 years to cover everything. But we are continuously learning along with all of you. And one of the best things about utilizing our consulting services is that we can help you and help your event be as successful as possible by learning from our experiences, both positive and constructive. If you have an event coming up that you would like support or guidance on, we have different levels of consulting, and we would be happy to schedule a 30-minute meeting to discuss how we might be able to best support your specific event. If you are interested in this service, you can email us at the email address on the slide, and we can get that on the calendar. During this 30-minute meeting, we will cover all of your specific event needs and how we can help you be successful. Our goal is to support you and take some stress out of your event by handling all the tech and platform side of things so you can focus on the content and speakers of your event. So now let's open it up to a few more questions.
Yes, so it looks like we have a couple chat questions. So first, can you recommend any platforms that have virtual exhibit halls?
Yeah, so one that I have kind of been involved with is SpotMe, and it has a cool option where you can have different sponsor booths set up. So that's a cool option where you are able to do the full event, and then there's also a section where you can bounce over and you can go to kind of an exhibition type situation. And then I also just saw something come into my inbox, and I think it's called Xvox, or I actually don't remember exactly the name, but it's like little robots that are able to go around virtually a exhibition hall, which is really cool. And so there's so many things that are coming up and popping up that are new, cool ideas. And I'll actually look into that and we can send it out in the post communication.
Cool, thank you. And yeah, I should have mentioned, so if you have any questions, feel free to chat them. You can chat them directly to me, you can chat them to everyone, or if you'd like to come off mute, you're welcome to ask them yourself. But Lisa, we do have a question from you, so I'll give you a second if you want to come off mute to ask your question. Otherwise, I can ask it for you.
Oh, sure. Yeah, I just was curious if there's any specific tools you would recommend for maybe breaking up some of the event with interactive pieces. I know you mentioned polling and chat, breakout rooms, but maybe other things I know there's something like a Mentimeter or something where you can have people answer a question and then it kind of makes a word cloud online, or just other things like that they might be able to kind of engage throughout the event to break it up a little bit. Any other kind of suggestions for that?
Yeah, we've kind of used a variety of different things to encourage engagement. Yeah, we actually used Poll Everywhere. We've used that a bit to like do the word clouds, which is kind of fun. You can project your screen and you can have it start populating as you're going, which is kind of a cool option. We've also, yeah, like we've broken up one of our events with like a cocktail class in the middle to kind of get people involved with that. You can like it's cool because you can like send out a gift basket ahead of time with all the ingredients and like have people engage that way. Danny, do you have any other ones that you want to add in?
Yeah, I mean, don't forget about like your basic ones, right? Like just stand up and take like a seventh inning stretch. You know, the basics are good, and you know you don't have to get too crazy, but there are so many options out there. There's a lot of like add-on tools you can use to do different survey questions and polling. Yeah, but I think what we found is activities where people are doing stuff during content helps people kind of just reset mentally because they were kind of in learning mode and now they're like, okay, I'm going to process that by doing something else, and then they can come back to learning mode. So yeah, I would say anything that you can physically get up and do is always encouraged.
Yeah, I'll jump in here too. I was just in a 2-day conference, and the conference organizer sent a little basket, like Danny mentioned, that had like a coloring book and coloring pencils and Play-Doh to play with your hands, and like a letter board so you could kind of interact and like hold up, words that what was your biggest takeaway from stuff. And that was super helpful for me, instead of trying to focus for 4 hours, I could kind of like do a little something with my hands. So yeah, great suggestions.
Great, thank you guys.
Yeah.
Let's see. Okay, so I have a couple questions here in chat. First one is, how has the switch to a virtual conference typically affected registration numbers? It's a great question.
I would say it's actually been better for registration because you're reaching audiences that you wouldn't have reached beforehand. Just by the simple fact that it's like out in the world and people don't have to physically come to a location. So registrations have actually been higher. The caveat to that is that the attrition rate is usually higher as well. So attrition is, how many people registered versus how many people show up. So because a lot of these recordings are sent out afterwards, people are like, oh, that sounds really cool, I want to register for it. But then they can't actually attend it during that day or time because they have a meeting or, kids or dogs or, whatever life has at this point in time. So just be conscious that you will probably get more registrations, but you'll also have a higher attrition rate of people not being able to show up. So kind of a catch-22 with hosting online events.
Thanks, Danny. I have another question here. Do you have some information on pros and cons of the different platforms with that list of platforms that you shared earlier? Do you have some, pros and cons lists or anything like that you can share?
Yeah, so I mean, we haven't totally interacted with every single one on that list. There's so many out there, and of course, they're going to be so different. And the ones that we have worked with pretty closely, it's usually GoToWebinar, of course, Zoom, Remo, and some other ones. We do have, I guess we do have some opinions of like what is beneficial, what is hard to work with. And so we can share that with you. We have a little bit of a platform guide that we have been putting together and through our experiences and our times spent being with these platforms.
Awesome. And let's see, we have another chat from Chris. Chris, if you want to come off mute to ask your question, you're welcome to. Otherwise, I'm happy to ask it for you. But this is about multi-day events. So
we're having a 2-day event for the Pet Sustainability Coalition in December. And you're talking about 14 minutes here being the most effective. So you answered a little bit about having stand-up exercise breaks, but is there any other tips and tricks you've learned how to fully engage I know you can't fully engage, but at least try to engage your attendees from like 9 o'clock until 5 o'clock?
Yeah, that's a great question, Chris. It's so good to see you.
I love your hair.
Thank you. Yeah, so 14 minutes of heavy content is what psychologists are saying people can focus on for heavy content. So like today we scheduled a 45-minute webinar, but we didn't do 45 minutes of just throwing it, like talking at you. Well, I guess we kind of are, but like it's not heavy content, right? Like we did a poll, there's some like Q&A sessions throughout. So just because 14 minutes is the norm right now doesn't mean that you can't still do other things during your multi-day conference. So you can do workshops where people are interacting and giving opinions and coming up with solutions. You can we talked about a couple of engagement tools about getting up and moving and stuff, but yeah, just because it's 14 minutes of heavy content doesn't mean you can't fill that time with other worthwhile things. So breakout rooms is usually a good move. So like if you do still need like heavy content, you can break it up and be like, okay, here's what we're going to talk about, and then engaging people more in a conversation as opposed to talking at you can help with that. But yeah, breaks are good. I would keep your sessions shorter so there's not as much pressure. If it's a multi-day conference, I would consider, like, Google has these speedy meetings concept where you end every meeting, 10 minutes before the top of the hour. So that way people can go, get a refill on coffee, have a bio break, stand up, stretch. So just include those things throughout your multi-day event, and I think you'll be good. But you can also reach out to us and we can talk specifically about what things that might work for your specific event.
Yeah, and
Okay.
also just to piggyback off that, one thing that I have seen with the multiple day conferences is being able to break it up into like different sections. And so with the SpotMe platform that I mentioned earlier, you can break it up into different tracks. So you can do like a track that's learning about this specific topic and a track that's on this specific topic. And so people being able to choose when to join, that's like the most aligned and most what they actually want to engage with. I feel like that's kind of helpful instead of being like, okay, I'm going to wait on this call for 5 hours just to wait for this one thing that I might actually be interested in. So like giving people the opportunity to bounce in when they know that they actually are wanting to engage with that specific content is helpful too.
Okay. One thing I'll share with you about the exhibit hall is we found a company out of Atlanta called V-Link, V is in victory, that has a real dynamic exhibit hall for as many booths as you want to have, and they can customize them in 3 or 4 different ways that they charge you different amounts for. And we were hesitant at first whether those would be something that sponsors and members of our coalition or people that want to be providing services to our coalition would be interested. And I think with only about 2 weeks of being alive for taking applications for those, we've already gotten about 50 paying booths.
Nice.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
So that one's called V-Link. I was just wondering if you knew of any more. And you said you're gonna do some research and send out a list. So I'd be curious about that, and I'll be happy to let you know how our experience is in December.
Yeah,
Great.
please. Yeah, we're always learning, and it seriously feels like there's 100 new platforms that come out every single day. Like we had a list a couple weeks ago, and now it's already like 3 times that because there's just so many people or like new platforms that are coming up. So yeah, please share your feedback and experience, and we'd love to chat with you about it.
Okay.
Definitely.
So I have another question. So this is from Tina. Tina, again, feel free to chime in if you'd like. But so this is about for training events. Do you recommend that the attendees keep their video on? So I guess if you could address, video on for speakers, for attendees, that kind of stuff.
Yeah, so because of social distancing, and everyone working remotely, it is nice to see people. And psychology, again, is saying that it is helpful to have people's videos on because it does give a little bit of connection, even when you can't be in person together. The caveat to that is, if people have really messy backgrounds, that can be distracting. If you see kids running through the background. So yes, video on is always great, but be aware of what is in your background. So I'm sure we've all seen or heard the horror stories of, partners walking through, the middle of someone's conference call or, kids screaming. So yeah, be cautious and aware of those things. But if you can have your video on as much as possible is great.
And then let's see, another question, if you can elaborate on why it's important to charge for virtual events.
Yes, it's important to charge for hybrid and virtual events in the same way you would charge for an in-person event, because people need to learn that they are paying for the experience, for the content, for the information that they're receiving. You can offer tiered pricing based on how much experience a person's going to receive during the event, but do not discount based on the location of an attendee, because that will start to undermine your authority and undermine the information that you're providing people.
Cool. All right, and then I have another chat. We've kind of addressed this, but this is kind of a different twist on it. So, so Jesse, feel free to jump in, but the question is, how would you recommend breaking up a pre-recorded session to not be giving heavy content for the full length of the session, 45, 60 minutes?
I mean, I would say if it's already pre-recorded, there's not a whole lot you can do unless you wanted to intentionally stop the recording, give people 10 minutes to get up and stretch, and then continue on with the recording. But if it's pre-recorded, it's pre-recorded, right? You can't change that necessarily. So
Yeah, and I would say I've seen a lot of experiences where it's a pre-recorded session, it's all good to go, and then you come back in and the speaker is on camera to answer questions. So being able to also give that opportunity where it's, people have questions, but since it's pre-recorded, there's no way to ask it in the moment. So giving that opportunity to bounce in and have some question and answer if your speaker is available and able to do that, I think that's really beneficial.
All right, so I think we have time for maybe just one more question. So this is about what are the current regulations for events, and can you still do in-person events, and kind of what is that looking like, especially I guess kind of specific here to Denver, Colorado, since that's your area of expertise.
Yeah, so this is a great question with a very fluid answer. We're limited to restrictions from the city and county of Denver based on the new health dial released by the state of Colorado a couple weeks ago. So what this means is that capacity rates can change week to week based on current testings, positive results from COVID. But at this current point, we're able to host events at 50% capacity in all of our event spaces. And then, we've also incorporated, socially distant tables, traffic flows, mandatory mask wearing, additional hand sanitizers, a plethora of things as well.
Cool. And I think that's about all we're going to do. We're going to kind of wrap up a little early, give you guys a bio break before your next thing, I guess, practice what we preach, right? But Danny, if you could just tell us one more time about, your consulting services and how to engage with that. It sounds like there's a lot of events that are happening and lots of questions and stuff, which is awesome to hear. So tell us a little bit more about that.
Yeah, so our consulting services are like a plan your own adventure type of service. So we can be as involved in your event as you need, or we can be as hands-off as you need as well. So we do everything from, helping establish an event timeline to tech runs, platform research, trying to think of what other like pre-event things we do. We do a lot of things. Managing speakers, sending out registration confirmations, all of the things leading up to an event, regardless if it's in person or virtual, but in this capacity, it would be a virtual setting. And then, for day of an event, we can run the platform for you. We can launch visuals, PowerPoints, videos. We can manage the chat function like Mariah, you've done today. We can, throw questions at speakers. We can do breakout rooms. We can, move people around. I mean, there's just kind of no limit to what we can actually do on a virtual platform. But like I said, we can be as involved in your virtual event as you want or as hands-off as you need. But we really just want to help people, by taking some of the stress off of them, by dealing with the technology, the platform pieces, incorporating some of this event psychology that's coming out and just helping the events be really successful. So ideally, we like when people engage our consulting services as early as possible, but we just booked an event for next Thursday. So we are also adept at coming onto events in a very short time frame too.
Cool. Thank you. I think that's about all that we have time for today. I know that there's some follow-up that we'll do, so we'll send this out, this recorded session out so everyone can see it. We'll send some other, information that our amazing events team here has gathered to.
Can I ask you a quick question?
Sure.
What Danny just described there, how do you charge for that? Is it hourly? Is it a package?
Right now it's an hourly fee.
An hourly fee? How much per hour?
Our nonprofit rate is $100 an hour and our for-profit rate is $150 an hour.
Okay, and is that no matter what you're doing, like if you're standing by on the event in case there's technical difficulties versus planning, it's all the same?
Yep, we have the same rate just to make it easier for people as far as like billing goes and all of that kind of stuff. Regardless of what rate you come in at, we do offer a 30-minute consultation free of charge. So we can address, questions, decide if we are the best fit for you, make sure that we can, handle your event needs, that kind of stuff.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, thank you again so much to everyone for attending today, and keep an eye out for the follow-up email that we'll be sending here shortly. We thank you again, and thank you to our speakers. And we hope to see you around at another webinar here soon. Definitely get in touch if you have any other questions or anything.
Bye.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.